Hello, students, and welcome to Mr. Sandwich Reads. I am, as always, Mr. Sandwich, and today we're going to try something new. We're going to get prepared for a Socratic seminar, but to do that, first, we need to read an article. In fact, I'm going to share two articles with you about the same subject, and we're going to take some notes and get ready for a discussion on that. Well, let's take a look. What I wanted to read about, really the topic of this Socratic seminar, is going to be censorship. And we have a current example now, just showing you what we're going to do for our notes. These are called Cornell notes, where we kind of have it split by we got topic on in one column, and then we're going to take our notes on the right-hand side. And I split that up. I want you to identify the title, author, the publication, which is The Guardian, theguardian.com. You could put, and then publication date. We'll take a look. You want to make sure that the publication is. I think I once heard like 4 years is considered recent and valid. You start to get older than that, and the source becomes a little bit more questionable. All right, as we're reading, you may want to highlight or take note of key facts, and then after we're done reading, you'll write a brief summary. I'd say 3 to 4 sentences on just what the article is overall about, and then separating the summary with the overview of or synopsis of what the passage is about or what the article is about. Then you get to share your opinion. Then this part down here is all your response. It's what you think, okay? Well, let's jump into this article. This is Roald Dahl books rewritten to remove language deemed offensive. Augustus Gloop, now enormous instead of fat. Mrs. Twit, no longer ugly, and Oompa Loompas are gender neutral. Let me just do this later. Okay, so let's read this. Roald Dahl's children's books are being rewritten to remove language deemed offensive by the publisher Puffin. Puffin has hired sensitivity readers to rewrite chunks of the author's text to make sure the books, quote, can continue to be enjoyed by all today, end quote, resulting in extensive changes across Dahl's work. Edits have been made to descriptions of characters' physical appearances. The word fat has been cut from every new edition of relevant books, while the word ugly has also been culled, the Daily Telegraph reported. Augustus Gloop in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is now described as enormous. In the Twits, Mrs. Twit is no longer ugly and beastly, but just beastly. Hundreds of changes were made to the original text, and some passages not written by Dahl have been added. But the Roald Dahl Story Company said it's not unusual to review the language during a new print run, and any changes were small and carefully considered. In The Witches, a paragraph explaining that witches are bald beneath their wigs ends with the new line, "There are plenty of other reasons why women might wear wigs, and there is certainly nothing wrong with that." In previous editions of James and the Giant Peach, the centipede sings, "Aunt Sponge was terrifically fat and tremendously flabby at that. And Aunt Spiker was thin as a wire and dry as a bone, only drier." Both verses have been removed, and in their place are the rhymes, "Aunt Sponge was a nasty old brute and deserved to be squashed by the fruit, and Aunt Spiker was much of the same and deserves half of the blame." References to female characters have disappeared. Miss Trunchbull in Matilda, once a most formidable female, is now a most formidable woman. Gender-neutral terms have been added in places. Where Charlie and the Chocolate Factory's Oompa Loompas were small men, they are now small people. The Cloud Men in James and the Giant Peach have become cloud people. Puffin and the Roald Dahl Story Company made the changes in conjunction with Inclusive Minds, which its spokesperson describes as a collective, quote, "a collective for people who are passionate about inclusion and accessibility in children's literature." Alexandra Strick, a co-founder of Inclusive Minds, said they aim to ensure authentic representation by working closely with the book world and with those who have lived experience of any facet of diversity. A notice from the publisher sits at the bottom of the copyright page of the latest edition of Dahl's books. The wonderful words of Roald Dahl can transport you to different worlds and introduce you to the most marvelous characters. This book was written many years ago, and so we regularly review the language to ensure that it can continue to be enjoyed by all today. A spokesperson for the Roald Dahl Story Company said, "When publishing new print runs of books written years ago, it's not unusual to review the language used alongside updating other details, including a book's cover and page layout. Our guiding principle throughout has been to maintain the storylines, characters, and the irreverence and sharp edged spirit of the original text. Any changes made have been small and carefully considered. All right, well, let's stop there and let's start. Let's fill in our Cornell notes based on this. Now, here we do see Hayden Vernon is who wrote this article. Now, we could take the title here: Roald Dahl books rewritten to remove language deemed offensive. Rewritten to remove language and I said the author of that was Hayden Vernon, which we see here. Hayden Vernon. The source was theguardian.com. This is an independent British news source. And this was from February 18th. So it's pretty recent, a couple weeks. Okay. Key facts. Recent publications of Roald Dahl's works have been rewritten. I might include some examples here. I'm just going to go in and copy and paste my examples. Now, they do say that I like the example of the descriptions up above. Where were those? They were down below. There it is. All right, so I'm going to take both verses have been removed in their place. Yeah. Okay. An example is James and the Giant Peach. The centipede sings. All right. So this article is really about, and I would also add several editors say it's not unusual to update publications or book publications. They mention such as the layout and cover. All right, so summary. This article talks about changes to the work of author Roald Dahl. Some of these changes include, I'm trying to think, maybe like, or to include more inclusive language, especially around characters' physical descriptions. Also, many characters, or some characters, the Oompa Loompas, I'm trying to think, in terms of in the Cloud People, it mentioned the language has become more gender neutral. Language. So now that we have a summary, now's where you can go down and say how you feel about this. Do you think that this is reasonable in this day and age, that we be mindful of what children are reading? Do you feel like this is censorship run amok, and why are we changing the language of a deceased author? I wonder, now the family owns like the rights to Roald Dahl's works. I wonder how they feel about this. I haven't seen or read anything about that. How do you feel about this? Go ahead and Take a moment to respond. Just pause right now and respond. And then when you're ready, rejoin me, and I'm going to read this next article, which is it's met with some criticism from another author. So go ahead, pause, and give me your response. Okay, and if you're back, you've done you filled in your notes, ready for a Socratic seminar for a discussion about this. Well, let's read a little bit further, because this was a response that came out 2 days after that last article I just read. Rishi Sunak joins criticism of changes to Roald Dahl's books. Number 10 says we shouldn't gobble funk with words, as Philip Pullman suggests work be left to go out of print. So that's another point of view we could add. Rishi Sunak has intervened in the row over the rewriting of parts of Roald Dahl's books to remove language deemed inappropriate, portraying it as an attack on free speech. His comments came after the author, Philip Pullman, suggested Dahl's work should be allowed to fade away and be replaced by more modern children's writers. Dahl's publisher, Puffin, has been criticized in recent days after hiring sensitivity readers to go over his texts to make sure the books, quote, can continue to be enjoyed by all today, end quote. Some have said derogatory references to people's physical appearances, as well as other characteristics in Dahl's work, are not suitable for young readers. On Monday, Sunak's official spokesperson said, "When it comes to our rich and varied literary heritage, the Prime Minister agrees with the BFG that we shouldn't gobble funk around with words. I think it's important that works of literature and works of fiction are preserved and not airbrushed. We have always defended the right to free speech and expression." Pullman, however, simply encouraged children to read better authors. Let him go out of print, the author of his Dark Materials said on Monday. He told BBC Radio 4's Today program that people should instead explore writers such as Mallory Blackman, Michael Morpurgo, and Beverly Naidoo. Read all of these wonderful authors who are writing today, who don't get as much of a look in because of the massive commercial gravity of people like Roald Dahl. He said Dahl's work, if left alone, would not disappear overnight or be substantially changed in the public's consciousness because of the vast numbers of existing editions sitting on shelves in homes, school libraries, and elsewhere. What are you going to do about them? All these words are still there. Are you going to go round up all the books? Are you going to go round up all the books and cross them out with a big black pen? Asked about the controversy over the rewrites, he said, Dahl can look after himself. I hadn't read his books for many years, and I don't want to again. And again, by Dahl can look out for himself, I'm sure he's referring to the family estate, who now owns those rights. He added, the point is, these words, these phrases, and language uses do change over time. For a young author not coming in, who hasn't got the clout and the commercial power of someone like Roald Dahl, it's quite hard to resist the nudging towards saying this or not saying that, which is a pity, I think. So there, the criticism is by censoring somebody as big as Roald Dahl, who has this great reputation. He wrote James and the Giant Peach, The Witches, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Many people know Roald Dahl. Does this put pressure on newer authors to sort of what many people would say is self-censoring? They're maybe going to change their wording based on the perception they feel they're going to get from the public. So are they not being true to their own writing spirit? That's for you to decide. But that is the criticism here. Hundreds of changes have been made to Dahl's original text. For example, in the Twits, Mrs. Twit is no longer ugly and beastly, but just beastly. We talked about that. References to people being fat are also among the edits, which are made in conjunction with Inclusive Minds, a collective for people who are passionate about inclusion and accessibility in children's literature. The Roald Dahl Story Company has said it's not unusual to review the language during a new print run, and any changes were small and carefully considered. Ashley Booth, 33, owner of A New Chapter Books, which specializes in books from inclusive and diverse perspectives for schools, said the focus should be on promoting novels written by people with lived experiences or own voice stories. There aren't that many books that people would need to get rid of. Most of what's been published is fine, but we've got to keep new stuff rolling in. As a primary school teacher, he said schools can help guide children through books that contain what might be considered outdated ideas. In Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, there's quite a racist scene. That's the kind of thing we should be writing out. I would much prefer that we are pumping money into new, exciting authors that are writing diverse books that appeal to the children now, he said. Among those to criticize Puffin is the author Salman Rushdie, who framed the issue as one of free speech. The Booker Prize winner tweeted, Roald Dahl was no angel, but this is absurd censorship. Puffin Books and the Dahl estate should be ashamed. Okay, so it sounds there, based on that criticism, that Roald Dahl's family has agreed to these changes. Suzanne Nozzle, the chief executive of PEN America, PEN America, a community of more than 7,000 writers advocating for freedom of expression, said, those who might cheer specific additions to Dahl's work should consider how the power to rewrite books might be used in the hands of those who do not share their values and sensibilities. The literary agent Alice Sutherland Haas said she thought publishers could look to methods employed by Disney. Perhaps for older books, publishers could do something similar to what Disney has done in front of their old animated films, e.g. The Aristocrats, with a disclaimer at the front saying it contains offensive language and depictions. I know Peter Pan I also watched with my son, and same thing in that. I think Pinocchio also has a warning about like tobacco use. But she said Dahl and older books were not the right area of focus. It bothers me more that new books are still being published today with the same stereotypes and language, she said, and maybe we as an industry should be focusing on that. Dahl, who died in 1990, has regularly featured among the UK's favorite authors, but the editing of some of his works is just the latest reassessment of his legacy. In 2020, his family apologized for the lasting and understandable hurt caused by Roald Dahl's anti-Semitic statements. So what's new in his books? And here, this just goes into more detail. I think we read a lot of these. Yep, these all came up in the last article, so I'll just leave that up there, but I'm not going to read through that. So go ahead, go back to your Cornell notes, see if there's any key facts you want to add to that. We get more criticism here. We also get some suggestions, for instance, adding just like a little publisher note at the very beginning. So not changing the language of the original work, but just giving a little note that some of it might be outdated. What do you think of that idea? Should we just let some of these older authors slowly fade away and focus more on newer authors? So tell me what you think when it comes to censorship and free speech, but when it also comes to inclusivity and making sure that books are appropriate and setting a positive example, I'd say, for young people. Now, something to consider is a lot of these characters are villainous. But I guess by using some of the language, calling them, like, for instance, body shaming with fat, or talking about baldness, when applying those characteristics to villains, does it maybe make those characteristics less desirable? And by the way, I would say, I always complain there's very few bald heroes, and there's a lot of bald villains. So as a bald guy, we could do better. We need bald heroes out there. So I'm all for inclusivity, but this gets a little blurry when it comes to free speech. So tell me what you think, and I'm looking forward to a good Socratic seminar. All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for following. Get those notes filled in, and let's get ready for a good conversation. All right.